Hoo boy! You know, I almost skipped the Linkin Park albums in doing the old ass albums cast. Originally, I was going to keep this more to albums that I still listen to this day, stuff that has had a big impact on me over the years. And since it's been a long time since I've really been a Linkin Park fan, and since all of their albums since their second one have been completely unappealing to me, I was just gonna kind of skip these. But then I thought about it, and it's certainly true that Linkin Park is important to my musical development. It's certainly true that they were my favorite band for a time, that the Hybrid Theory album is the first album I ever asked for. Certainly the one that I listened to the most as a child. And I figured there's definitely gotta be somewhere for me to talk about these albums. Like, I'm definitely gonna have to talk about Linkin Park somewhere at some point, and what better place and time than in the old ass albums cast. Yes, Linkin Park was a very integral band to me as a child. As I've said before, I grew up surrounded by music. It was always a thing in my household. We were always listening to the radio, particularly rock radio, and I always liked fun, intense, heavier songs, which may not be an accurate way to describe Linkin Park if you're like into heavy music, but if you're someone who was just listening to the radio in the year 2000, compared to most of what you would hear on alternative rock radio, One Step Closer by Linkin Park was gonna be one of the heaviest, most intense songs. And man, the first time I heard that song on the radio, it was instant love. Like, this was probably the first time I can remember that I heard a song and I really wanted to find it again. Like, I didn't know who it was by, I didn't know what it was, I just knew it was loud and fun and crazy, and I wanted to hear it again. I would have been 9 years old in the year 2000, by the way. I don't remember if Crawling had come out by the time I actually got the album, because I know that I had heard One Step Closer, and that song was never a huge single. Like, it got some radio play, but it was really when Crawling and In the End became singles that this album started to take off, and Linkin Park became kind of a household name in rock circles. Although, for me at the time, I felt like the only one who listened to Linkin Park, because even though their stuff was on the radio and it was on TV, I couldn't get any of my friends to listen to it, because most of them listened to pop music. You know, I wasn't really friends with anybody who liked rock. And while this was an album that my mom could easily listen to in the car, that my brothers could listen to, you know, everybody in the family was okay with it, Linkin Park was very definitively my thing, in a way that nothing had been up to that point. My mom would not have purchased Hybrid Theory of her own accord. It was something I begged to be, let into the household. Not the first album I bought with my own money. That would be Iowa by Slipknot, which was probably a year or so later or around the same time. And this was sort of the beginning of the nu metal craze. You had Slipknot, you had Disturbed, who I listened to the album The Sickness quite a bit, Papa Roach, and I named those bands specifically because those were the bands who were at the Big Day Off, also known as Off Fest. So during one of the Ozfest tours, there was a sort of side tour going on called the Big Day Off, or the Off Fest, where a group of the bands who were touring with Ozfest put on their own separate list of shows. And this was basically all of the nu metal bands. It was the 5 bands on the main stage were Slipknot as the headliner, Papa Roach, Linkin Park, Disturbed, and Mudvayne. And I could never get into Mudvayne. Yeah, Linkin Park was only 3rd on the bill. Disturbed was only 2nd on the bill. Both of them would later become, like, really big fucking bands. I mean, arguably all of these are big fucking bands, but they were all, like, really taking off at this time. We're talking 2001. They played at the Virginia Beach Amphitheater, which is a huge theater in VAB. I think there might have been a second stage with other bands, but I don't remember. I just remember that there was the 5, and I was there strictly to see Linkin Park. I hadn't really gotten into Disturbed yet. I remember catching a bunch of their set and thinking it was pretty good. That might be why I got the album. Like, I know I knew 1 or 2 of their singles, but I think we bought the Disturbed album because of their performance there. And I also wasn't really into Slipknot at the time. My cousin Boyd was a huge Slipknot fan, though, and he was at the show with me. And I remember that their set was so, like, loud and heavy and chaotic, and people were going so crazy that for me it was, like, a little terrifying and a little bit too much. But I did later end up, getting into them in maybe less of a big way. But I was there for Linkin Park, and this was a major event for me. I had always had long hair as a kid, but I really wanted to have blue, spiky hair for this show. Like, I don't know if it's that's what the band members were rocking. I know that Chester would have, like, blonde spiked hair, and maybe he had, like, green or something in one of the videos. But, like, I really wanted blue spiky hair. Blue is my favorite color. So I got my hair cut short and bleached, and gelled and dyed blue, temporarily blue, for the sake of this show. And like, I bought a special outfit, like, because my mom's big into like going all out for concerts, so she was way into helping me with this. So I was like totally fucking decked out for this show. And by that point, I knew the album like the back of my hand, and like, they only had the one album at the time, so they played the majority of it in their set. Pretty short album. In fact, I think it was everything except for Cure for the Itch. I was way into it. I would listen to this album on repeat all day. We had a stereo system in my room with a CD player, and I would just run this CD over and over again. I'd make my mom listen to it in the car over and over again. Like, basically, anytime my mom wasn't playing System of a Down, we were playing Linkin Park. And for me at the time, it was basically just a fun album. Like, I never read into the lyrics. I never like knew what the songs were about or anything. I knew all the lyrics, but it was just there to be like fun. Like, I just saw it as hype heavy music. And pretty much what were my favorite songs were the ones that were like the most fun to sing along to. One Step Closer was by far my favorite. I loved Points of Authority, Crawling, In the End, Pushing Me Away. Like, these are the songs that are particularly fun to sing to. And I think it had a huge impact on me as, like, a singer and rapper, like, vocalist in general. You know, like, I still do those things, and in fact, I've been putting more into that part of my career in the last few years, and people are actually starting to, respond to my music. Like, it's weird for me to describe myself as a vocalist because it feels very conceited, since it's not like I'm actually a popular vocalist or anything, but like, if you at all take the idea that I am a vocalist and rapper seriously, Hybrid Theory was like kind of the inception point of that, because I would sing along to these songs so much. I remember that I was constantly training my voice to be able to nail stuff like, Chester's incredibly long, like singing or screams over song, like, the sacrifice of hiding in a lie. Like being able to hold a note all the way through. I'm trying to think of what was my favorite to try to do. Well, like Points of Authority with the rap verse, they have to do the whole thing in one breath, Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame and puts your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race, the pace is too fast, you just won't last. Which, with the lungs of a 9-year-old, is not the easiest to do. I feel like there's a part where Chester just, like, does one continuous scream for, like, a fucking 30 seconds, and I really trained myself to be able to do that. And as a little kid, I had a high-pitched girly voice, so I was like right in the range of a lot of Chester singing, which I'm not at all anymore. It's actually really hard for me to hit those notes now. But, the fact that I can string together rhymes and sounds has a lot to do with growing up on Linkin Park. I mean, if you listen to my rap voice, I think it sounds fairly similar to fucking Mike Shinoda. So, especially when I just do, like, my generic rap voice as opposed to throwing it, which I think part of the reason that I do so many weird, funky voices on my albums is because I'm trying not to sound like Linkin Park, because if I rap with, like, a serious tone, it just sounds exactly like it. So, yeah, it was pretty fucking important. And looking back on Linkin Park's albums, I feel like it's surprising how much of it holds up, but also how much of it doesn't. Like, it's almost weird to see this album as basically half good. Like, I would really say that about half the tracks on Hybrid Theory are really good, and the other half are just, like, mediocre. And it's funny for me to think that way because as a kid, growing up with this album, I thought the whole thing was amazing. Like, it's my favorite album. It's just awesome all the way through. I think the only song I didn't really care for as a kid was Runaway, which is a pretty terrible song, to be honest. But then growing up and sort of growing out of Linkin Park and, like, participating in musical circles where people really harsh on them and, like, say they're a shit band, it's like the opposite extreme. The whole album is shit. But neither of those is true. The singles on Linkin Park albums are generally pretty great. They know how to write a really solid fucking pop hit in a rock song format, and they definitely had a really distinctive sound. Like, even compared to other nu metal bands, none of them really sounded like Linkin Park, and even the ones who came close, they didn't have the tightness of songwriting that Linkin Park did. Because the thing about Linkin Park, and the way I see them, is that they're very much a college band, a music theory band. Like, these are guys who studied music, who were in a music program, and this band sort of came out of that, and it was very calculated. For instance, lead singer Chester Bennington, who sadly passed away this year after a suicide, which, I mean, is upsetting, but perhaps not too surprising that someone who sort of gave voice to the depression and suicidal thoughts of so many people over the years would himself be grappling with those things. But, you know, it's definitely a shame that he's gone, especially someone who's so influential on me, to disappear so young, you know. But Chester was hired onto the band. Like, the rest of the bandmates, they had put together this group, and they literally auditioned for singers in, like, their college. And when they heard Chester, they immediately were like, okay, you're our guy. And they made him the lead singer. Like, that's the kind of, you know, way that they built this band. It's like they built it around the sound. Like, they knew what they were gonna do, and they found the people who could do it. And when you listen to their music, it all feels very calculated and formulated and studio. It is not just a bunch of dudes trying to make heavy music, which is what I think a lot of, like, metal bands are, and why a lot of bands typically come out sounding more like their influences, whereas Linkin Park, I think, sounds like they sounded pretty unique because their idea, I mean, the album's fucking called Hybrid Theory. The idea behind it was that they were going to hybridize heavy metal and hip-hop music to an extent that hadn't really been done yet. I really think the opening track of Hybrid Theory, Paper Cut, kind of lays everything that they were about out immediately. It starts off with a hip-hop beat. Like, it's an electronic beat, and I'm actually surprised by just how much of Linkin Park's music is electronic looking back on it, because they were presented as a rock band. You know, they're presented as a full band with a drummer and guitarists and stuff, and they have a DJ, Mr. Han, who's doing the, like, scratches and stuff like that. But when you actually listen to their music, like, with an appreciation for how music is made, like, the opening sounds on Paper Cut are very clearly synthetic. I don't know if they were played on, like, an electronic drum kit or whatever, but it's definitely not live drums. And those are matched by these heavily affected sounds that might be a lead guitar or even just a keyboard or something. And then, like, sound effects. And there's a lot of well-placed sound effects on this album that I think work shockingly well. Like, they could very easily have come off as tacky or stupid, but the way that, like, the DJ sound effects are used is really effective, and it's because they tried to make them all subtle. None of them, like, jumps out in your face. I want to say the best moment of a sound effect is at the beginning of the song Forgotten, where there's, like, this really heavy chugging riff, and then you just hear, like, whoopsh! Like, it's goofy, but it's so in the background, and it sounds so right at that moment that it totally works. But, like, listen to it again. It's like a goofy-ass sound effect. And, of course, the vocals are extremely affected across the whole album. Tons of multi-tracking, tons of, like, putting weird effects on the backgrounds, echoes and stuff like that. You know, the first lines, why does it feel like night today? And then you can hear, like, another voice, like, going, you know, today. Like, it's got, like, echoes and shit like that. It's all very digital. Because Linkin Park music has always had kind of a sci-fi tinge to it. They definitely present that in their music videos. Like, they're heavily influenced by stuff like Gundam and, like, weird sci-fi plots. And, like, they really try to communicate that in their imagery especially. And the song Paper Cut, even, like, the rock parts of the song are kind of rap infused. Like, the chorus is like, it's like I'm paranoid, looking over my back, it's like a whirlwind inside of my head. You know, it's got, like, that kind of slangy feel to it until you get to Chester just, beneath my skin. And, like, the rock part kind of takes a backseat. Whereas on the next track, One Step Closer, it's the rock that comes to the forefront. It's a big, heavy thrasher song. There's no rap vocals on the track. It's, I cannot take this anymore. saying everything I said before. All these thoughts, they make no sense, and it's got that tension build. The tension build across that song, really the first two songs, is amazing. Like, Paper Cut is a little bit more pulled back. It's less of like a thrasher song. It's more of a big, open, and spacious song, which is, I think, the sound that Linkin Park does the best on their first two albums. But, like, they still do really well on One Step Closer with, like, the heavy sound, a big chugging riff that fucking tears the roof off, and the, again, rising action throughout the song that disperses until you get to, shut up when I'm talking to you, shut up, which is a fucking perfect breakdown section in the song. I also really love, in the chorus of One Step Closer, the background riff that's kind of like, like, it's this sort of descending bass line in the background that works really well. But then I feel like things kind of go off the rails a little bit when we get to track 3, With You. With You is just a little too odd, and it does something that I think Linkin Park does the worst, which is the overly moodiness. When they get really self-serious and dramatic, and it's like, I hit you when you hit me back, we fall to the floor, the rest of the day stand still, fine line between this and that, when things go wrong I pretend that the past isn't real, this is where we get into like the cringy, overwrought part where like the music's doing this like dun, 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 dun. Like it's too dramatic, it's too self-serious, and the problem really is that Mike Shinoda is not the best rapper. Now, Linkin Park lyrics are extremely general. They all are describing like emotional problems in relationships, stuff like that, but all from the most general standpoint possible, as little specifics as possible, so that everybody can relate to it. If you pay attention to these lyrics and, like, you project yourself onto them, almost anybody has felt these ways. Like, One Step Closer. I cannot take this anymore. I'm saying everything I said before. All these words, they make no sense. I find bliss in ignorance. Nothing seems to go away, over and over again. Like, you can take any of these and interpret them in ways that will apply to you, and so it's very easy for anybody to connect with. But then you get to, like, all of those sound fine, like they're good sounding phrases. The problem with some of the songs is that Mike Shinoda doesn't always craft good sounding phrases. Sometimes it gets really mixed up, and the by far worst example of this on the album is in the song A Place for My Head, where the opening lyrics go, I watch how the moon sits in the sky on a dark night, shining from the light from the sun, but the sun doesn't give the light to the moon, assuming the moon's gonna owe it one. It makes me feel how you act with me, you do favors, then rapidly you just turn around and start asking me about things that you want back from me. And it's like, this, first of all, this metaphor has gone way too far. It is the most forced metaphor imaginable, comparing like, he's saying, like, oh, every time I do a favor for you, you're like, you want something from me, but that's not how it is with the sun and the moon. The sun just gives light to the moon doesn't ask for favors. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? And the worst part is, it doesn't even, like, rhyme, and it has no flow. I watch how the moon sits in the sky on a dark night, shining from the light from the sun, but the sun doesn't give the light to the moon, assuming the moon's gonna owe it one. There is only one rhyme in there, and it's an end rhyme, and it doesn't even fall right. It's terrible. It's like the worst rapping of all time. And of course, I thought it was amazing when I was a kid, because it's like somewhat fast, and so, like, I really had a lot of fun, singing along to it. God. Oh, Jesus Christ. So yeah, I think With You is a weaker song. I don't think the chorus works all that well. I don't like the generic guitars in the background, which is definitely a problem I have with a lot of Linkin Park songs, when their guitars get too generic. When the guitars are just basically playing one note in the background, and it just it sounds too flat and generic for me to take any interest in. But then we get to Points of Authority, which is one of the songs I actually like from this album, because I think it's got a really fun rap part, which again is corny, but it's really fun. Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame and puts your name to shame. Cover up your face, you can't run the race, the pace is too fast, you just won't last. It's like the most generic rhymes possible, but the flow is good and it's punchy, and if you've never listened to rap before, then you know it sounds good. It has got a great chorus on it, and this song later became one of the songs on the Gurren Lagann soundtrack, Nicopole. It's literally the same song. I have proven this on my SoundCloud, where I sang Points of Authority over Nicopole, and it's really hilarious. Then we get to Crawling, and this song is too fucking much. Crawling is way too far. Again, this is an overwrought emotional song that again has the really generic guitars in it, you know. I mean, what makes this song kind of work is how big the chorus is. Crawling in my skin. You know, it's like, it's extremely memorable. Unfortunately, it's also cringeworthy and meme-worthy. And, you know, the verses are just like, there's something inside me that pulls beneath the surface. It goes too far. You know, it's just a little too much. Then you get to Runaway, which I just think is a really unremarkable song. I don't think any of the lyrics are all that memorable. I think the chorus kind of leaves a lot to be desired. And that goes into By Myself, which is one of the heavier songs. And this is one of the tracks where Linkin Park does this heavy light thing that they do on actually a lot of the songs on this album, but like here it's really prominent, where it starts off like really heavy, but then it goes into like super chilled out, you know, moving all around, screaming of the ups and downs, pollution manifested in perpetual sound, the wheels go round and the sunset creeps behind street lamps, chain leaking concrete, which is actually a pretty okay rap verse. Like I think Mike does better with these like evocative images than he does with like just talking about his emotions. But By Myself, I think, is actually a pretty solid song if it's the one I think it is. Yeah, like I will say of Runaway that while I don't like Runaway the song, I think the way that song ends and dovetails into By Myself is one of the best moments on the album. When like you know, it's hitting you with like, I am so sick of the tension, sick of the hunger, sick of you acting like I owe you this. Find another place to feed your greed while I find a place to rest. And then you hear like a, and then right after that just hits you with, from the top to the bottom, bottom to top, I stop at the core, I've forgotten in the middle of my thoughts. And that's where that sound effect is. That's really well placed. But then the song just kind of cuts out of that intensity and becomes like a calm song, and it's like, oh, what happened? But then the lyrics are okay, and you've got that kind of cool imagery, and the chorus is pretty good. So By Myself is one of the better songs on the album. And that leads us into In the End, which is the next very overwrought song. But this was like the most rap-centric song, and as a kid, this is the one that like memorizing this whole rap was the like, you know, a really big part of getting me interested in rap music at all. You know, the fact that it is a full rap song, which I can't really say about any of the others except maybe Paper Cut, you know, but this one has like full fucking verses. It starts with one thing, I don't know why, it doesn't even matter how hard you try, keep that in mind, I designed this rhyme to remind myself how I tried so hard, you know, like. And I think the way that it integrates Chester's vocals over the rap is really clever. Like the way that, you know, there's always these 3 syllables at the end of each bar that he can sing along with, and it makes them like really punch, and like the whole song has a good pacing to it. I do think it's overwrought and emotional, but the piano melody in the song is very memorable and you know, sticks in your head. And the chorus is fucking huge. I tried so hard and got so far, and in the end, it doesn't even matter. It's such a good meme that, like, every time you, like, think, like, you do something and fail, you will always think, I tried so hard and got so far, and in the end, it didn't even matter. Like, it's a perfect lyric. I think it's a pretty alright song. A Place for My Head is the one that, again, has the really terrible rap verse. I actually kind of musically like this song. It's got this interesting acoustic hand-picked guitar thing going on, and some, like, cool DJ shit going on, and the chorus is alright, but, like, God, the rapping is so fucking bad. It's really embarrassing. Oh, shit, I got it wrong. I completely mixed up By Myself with Forgotten, when I was doing the "At the core I've forgotten in the middle of my thoughts," that was the end of A Place for My Head leading into Forgotten. I totally fucked that up. By Myself is a weak song. Everything I said about it is still true because it's very similar to A Place for My Head, but like it's not as good. But Forgotten is an alright song. I actually think it's pretty fun. It's got a really great chorus on it, where it's "In the memory you'll find me, eyes burning up, the darkness holding me tightly, until the sun rises up." Yeah, I like that song all around. Then you get to Cure for the Itch, which is the first of the Mr. Han songs. Because, they have a DJ, and on each of their albums, before the final track, at least on the first two albums, they would have this DJ song where it's just kind of fucking around with cool DJ sounds. When I was a kid, I thought Cure for the Itch was some kind of artistic masterpiece, because it's like all these weird noises and like samples and shit, and there's not vocals and stuff. But listening back to it, it's nothing to write home about. It's kind of, the first half of it is pretty weak, and the second half is just okay. It actually kind of reminds me of something Yuki Kajiura would make as background music, which is kind of funny. And then you get to Pushing Me Away, which I think is actually one of the better songs on the album. It's a really solid pop song that has that kind of build to epicness in it, where like even though it's only 3 minutes long, it feels really big and spacious. Which again, I've said is I think the best Linkin Park sound is when they go for something really like grandiose and not in the way of like Crawling where it's overwrought, like just something like like it sounds, it's like, yeah, it's got a bigness to it. I don't know why I keep using that phrase. Like I feel like I'm saying something different, but I'm literally saying the same phrase over and over again. But Paper Cut has that on this album. Pushing Me Away has it, and Pushing Me Away is very similar to the song Somewhere I Belong on Meteora, which I would argue is kind of like a better version of Pushing Me Away. Like it's almost the same song, but like with a little bit more hard-hitting lyrics and more like drive to the track. So overall, Hybrid Theory, I think, has, like, all of it is at a pretty okay level. Like, none of the songs are dismal. There's definitely ones that I don't like as much. I would say every song is, like, between a 5 and a 7 out of 10. Like, it's all in that range. You've got the stronger songs are, like, good, fun, heavy pop songs. Like, One Step Closer, Pushing Me Away, Paper Cut. But then you've got stuff that's just totally unmemorable, like Runaway and By Myself. Then we get to Meteora, and my experience with this album was a bit different. And I'm talking about both of them in one just because I don't want to have to do fucking any more videos on Linkin Park than this. But Meteora came out in 2003, and at first, I wasn't as into it as Hybrid Theory. Like, when I first discovered the album, I thought it was okay. I really liked Somewhere I Belong, and like probably a few other songs, but like I hadn't listened to it like a super amount. I don't even know if it was that I wasn't that into it, just as I hadn't listened to it as much, and like I had listened to Hybrid Theory so many fucking times. And by this point, I don't know if I was listening to as much nu metal. I still was definitely into nu metal bands, but like at this point a lot of them were on their disappointing second albums. Like Disturbed had put out their disappointing second album. Slipknot's third album had come out and it was kind of whatever, and like nu metal was already on the way out. It really only lasted a few years that it was like in high relevance. I don't know what else I would have been listening to at the time though. So I don't know. I just didn't listen to it that many times when it first came out. Maybe I was just too distracted because I was into anime at the time and I wasn't listening to much music. I have no idea. But about a year and a half later, when I was 14, I rediscovered this album at the time when I was getting into music in a big way. Same time that I was discovering Francis the Mute, the time that I was getting into, like, Gorillaz Demon Days. Like, amongst those albums, I was also listening to Meteora. And it slowly started taking on a lot more meaning for me because I started reading into the lyrics. And again, Linkin Park lyrics are extremely broad. They are relatable to everybody. But when you're 14, you can't really recognize that as easily. It's not as obvious that the songs aren't just about you, or like weirdly relatable, or like speaking straight into your soul, you know? So at this point, because I was a really emotional kid, I was like falling into hardcore depression at this time. Meteora was like, this is now the soundtrack of my life. Songs like Somewhere I Belong, Figure 09, Faint, these were all songs. Nobody's Listening, holy shit. Still feel like that song all the time. Like, these songs suddenly meant everything, you know, and were a big deal to me. But going back to this album, I feel like the highs are higher and the lows are lower as compared to Hybrid Theory. Like, Meteora has what I would consider my favorite Linkin Park songs on it. Straight up, Faint is the best Linkin Park song. I think it has the best use of their sound out of any songs. This is one that uses the more spacious sounding guitars to create a heavier, more propulsing track. Like, it's got all the vigor of One Step Closer and like that punchy, fun vibe, but it combines that with the bigness of songs like Somewhere I Belong and Paper Cut, and it also has some legitimate rapping on it. It has probably the best rapping that Mike Shinoda ever does on a Linkin Park album, you know? I am a little bit of loneliness, a little bit of disregard, handful of complaints, but I can't help the fact that everyone can see these scars. I am what I want you to want, what I want you to feel, but it's like no matter what I do, I can't convince you to just believe this is real, so his wordplay is not good, his rhyme scheme is not good, but he's got great flow on that song. Like, it's a really unique flow, you'll never hear it elsewhere. It's super interesting, it plays off the beat really well, and then it explodes into a huge, I can't feel the way I did before, don't turn your back on me, I won't be ignored, you know, like, which dovetails really well into a heavy breakdown. Hear me out now, you're gonna listen to me like it or not, which is like one of the heaviest vocals that fucking, Chester ever did. So yeah, it's the perfect Linkin Park song, and if all of their songs sounded just like Faint, I would be really happy with that. Like, I would love an album that all has like the energy and propulsiveness of Faint. And I also think that the digital strings or whatever at the beginning of the song sound really great. They're like, that sounds really good. The guitar riff is pretty generic, but it's, again, got that open sound to it that I like so much, which is the opposite of, for instance, Don't Stay, the first track on the album, which is fucking terrible, because the whole song is like, oh god, the riff is so repetitive and so generic, and then the chorus is da 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 da. I hate the guitars in the song, and they sound shitty. Like, this riff is meant to be really heavy, but it just sounds a little too thin. Like, it doesn't have that backing of like heavy bass and like intensity that a metal song would have. It just sounds like garbage. And like, Chester's performance on the song is fine. The lyrics are really fucking generic. Like, it's, sometimes I need you to stay away from me. I really hate this song. And I'm sure I loved it when I was younger. And I do think that in spite of the fact that I don't like the song, I think it makes for a great opening track structurally, because it's very hard-hitting and it doesn't let up. It's 3 minutes of non-stop energy. Like, after hitting you with the big riff, then it's like kind of bubbling under the surface in the background of the chorus when Chester's like, sometimes I, in disbelief I didn't. It's got that feeling of like, I always have this image in my head in the mosh pit of like big burly dudes who were all just walking around in circles staring at each other, waiting for the song to drop so they can start headbanging. And that's how it feels in the verses of the song. And then it gets heavy again for the chorus, and then it goes right into a breakdown with no pause, right back into a chorus, and it's over. Like, it's really fucking heavy, and it gets you like pumped for the album. But then that goes right into Somewhere I Belong, which is not a heavy song at all. It is like the chilled out, cool one. I've said already that I really like this song. It's spacious, it's cool, it's got a really memorable riff that like and then the if you watch the music video for this song, it like really communicates, I think, the feelings that it's supposed to have pretty well. And also there's Gundams in it, Gundam model kits and shit, so that's pretty cool. But yeah, I think Somewhere I Belong is one of their better songs. But then that goes right into Lying From You, which is just like Don't Stay. It's just like kind of too generic. The chorus sucks. I don't think it's a good song. And then it's got like it's got a big heavy breakdown, but it just kind of feels like I don't want a big heavy breakdown in the middle of an otherwise like lame and boring song, you know? Oh god, and then after that is Hit the Floor, which is like one of the outright worst Linkin Park songs. That one sounds... Hit the Floor sounds like it would have been made by a different nu metal band. Like a worse... Like, it sounds like the generic nu metal that was, like, so reviled at the time. You know, the whole thing is... What minute you're on? And I just think it's really shitty. And also has a really bad chorus to it as well. They were clearly trying to make, like, the heaviest Linkin Park song on that, but like it totally falls apart. And then that leads into another terrible song, Easier to Run, which I completely keep forgetting about. Like both of these songs, Hit the Floor and Easier to Run, I always forget exist. Easier to Run is super lame ballad. It's as overwrought as a song like Crawling, but it doesn't hit that big, you know, like epic memorable note. The chorus just feels really flaccid. It's easier to run, replacing this pain with something numb. Like, not really doing it for me. But then that's when Faint comes along and saves the whole album by being the best Linkin Park song. And you get to Figure 09, which this is another song that I don't like because of the genericness of the riff and that it sounds too thin, but I do think it's much better put together than Don't Stay. Figure 09 was the song that particularly I felt like it super related to me at the time, and listening to the lyrics now, I don't understand how. Like, they have nothing to do with whatever I was feeling at the time, and I don't know why I thought they did, but, you know, again, it's so broad, anybody can interpret it however they want. It definitely has one of the, stronger chorus than something like Don't Stay, but, it's still not one of the more memorable songs on the album. But that leads into one of the best Linkin Park songs, Breaking the Habit. And this one, similarly to Faint, I feel like plays to the band's strengths in a way that they rarely allow for. This one really embraces the kind of electronic sound, the spacey sound. It's almost got like a little bit of a cyberpunk flair to it. It's got a really mellow guitar line. It's definitely one of the mellowest Linkin Park songs, in spite of being one of their songs with focused entirely on Chester and being more emotionally driven. It is not overwrought. It is not crawling in my skin. And it is not I've become so numb. It's a more nuanced song. The chorus is I don't know what's worth fighting for or why I have to scream, but now I have some clarity to show you what I mean. Like, it actually sounds serious, and like the topic of the song is clearly very serious. Like, there's no question about it. This is a song about addiction, and this is by far, I think, the most specific Linkin Park song. Like, all their other tracks are like, this could apply to literally anything. But breaking the habit is like, clutching my cure, I tightly lock the door, I try to catch my breath again. And it's like, this is kind of unambiguous what the song's about. And I think that's why it hits a lot harder emotionally, and it feels more serious. It doesn't feel like a whiny child. It feels like someone really grappling with a fucking problem that they want to, they're trying to find the courage to break away from. It's got a great pacing to it, instead of having like a big heavy breakdown, it kind of just naturally transitions into, I'll paint it on the walls, 'cause I'm the one at fault. Also, anime music video. Just saying, music video, literally anime. Don't remember the name of the guy who animated it, but it was Studio 4C, I think, who made it. It was like one animator guy, but it's a great video. Yeah, one of the best Linkin Park songs by far. Then we've got From the Inside. I don't even remember what the fuck. Is this that really slow ballad? Oh yeah, From the Inside is fucking dog shit. It's just like Easier to Run, a way too slow of a ballad for Linkin Park. Nothing that really grabs my attention. I completely forget it exists on the album. And then we get into Nobody's Listening, which is an interesting track because it's probably the most hip-hop Linkin Park song. Like, it's clearly based on, like, a sample, and it's a sample from, like, an old, like, some kind of old Japanese samurai film kind of sound. It might even be, like, from an anime or something like that. Like, it's very Eastern sounding, and it sounds like something that like Wu-Tang Clan would rap over. It's got a little bit of rock and roll edge to it, but like it's for all intents and purposes a rap song that has Chester on the chorus. And I really like this song because it's way sassier than most Linkin Park songs. And it's also another one that's a little bit more specific because this one is very clearly like Mike Shinoda rapping about his craft, about like what goes into writing these songs. And it's kind of a fuck the haters song at that. It opens on a Jay-Z quote where he says, peep the style and the kids checking for it. The number one question is how could you ignore it, which is a Jay-Z line. This is also another of the most influential rap verses on me because I still to this day rap this to myself all the fucking time. Peep the style and the kids checking for it. The number one question is how could you ignore it? And drop right back in the cut over basement tracks and rap stats. Got you dropping the sack like rewind that and just roll with the rhythm. Rise from the ashes of stylist division with these non-stop lyrics of life living. Not to be forgotten but still unforgiven. And in the meantime there are those who want to talk this and that. So I suppose that it gets to a point where feelings gotta get hurt and get dirty with the people spreading the dirt. By far the best rap verse that Mike Shinoda's ever written. Even if it's still pretty corny and the wordplay is not that strong, his flow is on point, his lyricism, there's a lot more like punch and sassiness, and particularly the chorus. I love the try to give you warning but everyone ignores me, told you everything loud and clear but nobody's listening. It's such a like accusatory song, but not in the same like just aggressive way that the rest of their music is, where most of it again sounds like a screaming child. This one's a little bit more like bitch, like step off kind of song. And then you get into where Mike's kind of rapping his accolades, but like in the sense that they are his pain, like that's what allows him to do this. His heart full of pain, head full of stress, handful of anger held in my chest, and everyone else is a waste of time. I hate my rhymes, I hate everyone else's more. Like he's so mad at himself, but he also hates you guys. So like, yeah, I don't know. It's got a great attitude, and I would say in terms of what songs are influential on me, like to the present day, this one's probably the most. Aside from a lot of Linkin Park's sound kind of like forming the backbone of my taste and attitude, like this song in particular has a lot to do with like the way that my stuff sounds. Then you get to Session, which is like a much better version of Cure for the Itch. It's another Mr. Han track that's just like a instrumental song, but it's actually good. And then you get to Numb, which I feel the same way about the song as I feel about like Crawling and In the End, where it's just a little bit too much. It's a little too fucking crybaby, I think it's better than Crawling. Like Crawling is obnoxious, Numb is tolerable, but like I mean, if you watch the music video for Numb, it is exactly like it is a showcase of who listens to Linkin Park. Like it's a video about like a 14-year-old goth girl writing in her diary, like running away because her mom is like a bitch and she doesn't get along with the kids at school. Like it is literally the story of the Linkin Park song fan put to video, you know. And the lyrics are pretty like the lyrics are very young. Like what's interesting about this song is that whereas most of their songs can come from the perspective of like someone of pretty much any age, this one is like specifically about being a child who is like upset with their parents for the way that they sort of have too high of expectations for them. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing about the song, and I kind of like that, and I feel like I kind of did the same thing with my song like Stella the Magic, which is a song that's meant to sound like a Linkin Park song, but rather than being from the perspective of a 14-year-old, it's sort of speaking to them. Like I wrote the song to speak to young people about like what it is to be at that age, and I did it in a way that sounds exactly like Linkin Park. In fact, I've made a lot of songs that sound like Linkin Park. I can't pretend like they're not a huge fucking influence because I've definitely got like some kind of small organ in my body that releases something like every few months where it suddenly makes me want to be Linkin Park. And I dream of getting to front a band like this, getting to front a new metal band where I get to scream and sing and rap, and like it's the perfect genre for me. It's what I grew up on. So, in many ways, these are two of the most important albums to me. But in terms of listening to them now, it's very much something where I pick my favorites. And between these two albums, there's enough songs for a good album. Just take Paper Cut, One Step Closer, Points of Authority, In the End Can Stay, Forgotten Can Stay, Pushing Me Away, Somewhere I Belong, Faint, Breaking the Habit, Nobody's Listening, and Session. Like, take all of those, and you've got a solid 30-minute album. Throw away the rest of the tracks. You don't need them. Unless there's one you really like or something. But yeah. So, in any case, that's my thoughts on Linkin Park. These songs have crawled back onto my iPod in recent months, so I felt prepared to do this. It's not like I haven't listened to this band in forever. I have been steadily re-listening to them, which is why I felt confident to do this series, because if you asked me a couple years ago, I would have been like, I don't remember what the albums sound like. But yeah, that's it for this episode of the Old Ass Album Cast. Let me look over my list and see if I want to pick one. I really damned myself when I said I was going to do Linkin Park for the next video, because I was not in the mood to listen to them, and so I had to really force myself to do so in the time before this recording. So I don't know if I should like outright pick one, though all of these are way easier to listen to. We'll just make it a surprise. You'll know what it is when you get it. See you next time, everybody. Peace.